Yes, this is Jimmie here.
It's George Martin here. If you don't have any plans, I have a job for you. Ringo, our drummer, has fallen ill and can't go on tour with his band. We need you to stand in for him until he recovers. Can you do it?
Yes.
Good. Be at EMI Studios today at 3 p.m. sharp for rehearsal. And pack your bags. I'm not sure how long you'll be away. The plane leaves tomorrow. You do know which band I'm referring.
Yes.
If you could just recall one moment or one period of time during it all.
Yeah.
I'd like to know the highest moment when it was its best.
High moment was Australia. It's funny, but there was more people came to see us there than anywhere. I mean, it looked like, I think the whole of Australia was there.
The Beatles, minus Ringo and manager Brian Epstein, set forth on their first world tour proper. Brian Epstein had decided to stay with Ringo until he recovered from his bout of tonsillitis and would rejoin the tour, most likely in Australia. Until that time, Jimmie Nicol was doing his best to keep up and fit in with the other three Beatles. The tour began in Europe on the 4th of June. Then they swiftly moved onto the then British territory of Hong Kong. By then, the tour of the Antipodes was ever growing in the Beatles' minds, not quite knowing what to expect on the far side of the world. Yes, you heard correct. Australia's tropical city, the least prepared of all to receive such a famous entourage. And, in true Darwin fashion, it was a whirlwind visit. Well, at least it was on a cool, dry season night. Amazingly somehow, news spread that the Beatles' flight was stopping in at Darwin. Some 400 fans and journalists gathered near the airport terminal to greet the tired but conscious Beatles. Per capita, that was a pretty good turnout for the dead of the night. Maybe a sign of things to come. After that all too short stopover at Darwin, the Beatles continued on, and at 7:47 a.m, the Beatles, flying in from Darwin on the OAC, hardly getting any sleep that night, had officially started their Australian tour when they landed in Sydney. Sydney turned on the weather as they disembarked into a cold, wintry wind and rain. With almost useless umbrellas, the Beatles got soaked as they were paraded on the back of a trailer to greet the screaming horde of fans and press who had gathered en masse to finally see the actual Beatles in the flesh. And yes, the mania was as every bit alive in Australia as it was in the US and the UK. After the airport parade in Sydney, Mascot Airport, the Beatles are rushed to their Sydney hotel for some much needed rest before a barrage of press conferences and radio interviews starting at 4:30 p.m. The Beatles had had a hard day's night, and it won't be long until they have to move again.
What a day it was at Adelaide Airport. Arriving to meet the citizens were John Lennon, two other Beatle regulars, and Jimmie Nicol. Paul McCartney was on the beat as usual. Jimmie, of course, was deputising for Ringo Starr, who had been too ill to travel at the same time, but was coming along later.
What was the total signees for that petition ran by Bob Francis? 75,000? 80,000 signatures? In 1964, Adelaide had a population of about 668,000, as opposed to Melbourne and Sydney, which was 2 mil plus. When the Beatles stepped onto the tarmac at Adelaide Airport, they were greeted with the usual throng of maniacal fans. But in the space of an hour, the Beatles would be greeted with a crowd size, well, let's just say that even the Beatles were amazed. Not just Paul. Maybe he was. Estimates were between 250 and 300,000 Adelaideans had come to see the Beatles as their cavalcade made its way up Anzac Highway towards the Adelaide Town Hall. That's about 45% of Adelaide's entire population. Almost 1 in every 2 people had turned out to see the Fab Four in Adelaide. Observers say that each side of the Anzac Highway was at least 10 rows deep along the 7-mile stretch of road. Yes, some kids even wagged school to see them. The Beatles were paraded in a convertible car, which was detailed with the Beatles' names, especially for the event. Or maybe some people still didn't know what the Beatles looked like, so at least they had a point of reference. Ron Tremaine, the man who made it all happen, with a little help from his friends, travelled in that convertible car with the Beatles all the way to Town Hall in the city centre. Definitely the most front row seat a fan could get for this larger-than-life moment in Adelaide's and the Beatles' history. So this is the Anzac Highway in Adelaide that goes from Glenelg to the CBD, and this is where on June the 12th, 1964, where the Beatles had a cavalcade all the way up this stretch of road. If you can just imagine, 250,000 to 300,000 Adelaideans coming out to see the Beatles on this wide stretch of road. It's pretty amazing, and it even blew the Beatles away themselves. They didn't have a reception like this in the US. Upon the arrival at Adelaide Town Hall on King William Street, some 30,000 plus fans had amassed into a screaming throng. Some fans had been camping out for days in anticipation for this appearance. South Australian police had to wrangle hysterical fans out of the way so the cavalcade could park safely at the Town Hall entrance. At 12:45, after a brief meet and greet with the Adelaide Mayor, the 3 Beatles with Jimmie Nicol appeared on the Adelaide Town Hall balcony. The Beatles took their time to show their appreciation with waves and smiles to the adoring crowd. The Beatles were joined by Rod Tremaine and Bob Francis and were able to stick close to the Beatles throughout their entire stay in Adelaide. A good payoff for their contribution in getting the Beatles to Adelaide.
Well, fellas, tell me, what did you think of the Adelaide reception?
That was great. The best ever.
Was it like what I mentioned to you on the plane it would be?
Yeah, it was better. Yeah.
Was it like anything you've ever had before?
No, we've never done one of those drives as well. It was marvellous.
How would it compare with the ones in the United States when you arrived at this place there?
Bigger. It was bigger. Just more people.
Do you think it was very well conducted?
Yes, everybody was well behaved.
So just behind me here in King William Street in the centre of Adelaide is the Adelaide Town Hall, and this is where the cavalcade ended. And the Beatles got up on the balcony and they waved to tens of thousands of people, all squashed in, no room for traffic of any sort. This is the actual centre of Adelaide itself, and this was just so full of people that once again the Beatles themselves could not believe the reception that they were getting here in the city of churches. Right, so as you can see here at the Town Hall itself, just above me on the veranda, the City of Adelaide has chosen to remember the Beatles' time here in this city. Sorry about the traffic, but they've actually got a perspex cutout of an image of the Beatles. So anyone in the City of Adelaide come across here and know that in 1964 these 4 lads took over the city and the city came to a standstill. After about an hour, the Beatles then moved to the South Australian Hotel on North Terrace, where they would stay in Adelaide for the next 2 nights. The whole time of their stay, a crowd of thousands had gathered outside the street, just waiting and hoping to catch a glimpse of the Fab Four. So just behind me is the Stanford Hotel on North Terrace in the city block of Adelaide. When the Beatles came to Adelaide, they stayed at the South Australia Hotel, which was where the Stanford now stands. And they stayed there for 3 nights. And even at that time, there were Beatles fans waiting outside just to catch a glimpse of the Beatles. Thousands of people. So here the Beatles are, in Adelaide, the capital of South Australia. Pretty good result from a location that wasn't even considered, to now being the first city to host the Beatles in Australia. Melbourne, Sydney and Brizzy? Well, they'd have to wait a few more days. But it's one thing to have the world's greatest band set foot in your town. The real question is, will they please you? Well, on the evening of the 12th of June 1964, the city of Adelaide and the entire country of Australia would feel the vibrations that began reverberating around the world from Liverpool, England, when John Lennon Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr banded together to give the world something new, raw and exciting. I hope you have your ticket to ride. Now it's time for the main event. See you at the Centennial Hall, where a splendid time is guaranteed for all.